ladies and gentlemen, to an all-new reaction and review. Tonight, guys, I'm taking a look at a fantasy film from 1982. That movie is The Dark Crystal. Now, as some of you may happen to remember, a long time back, I covered Labyrinth, a movie very, very similar to this, which was also made by Jim Henson's company. And I knew almost nothing about Labyrinth going in. I know even less about this thing. About the only things I can tell you are the title, the fact that it's made by the Jim Henson company. Beyond that, the only other thing I can really tell you is that unlike Labyrinth, this thing does not have any human actors, and the entire cast is made up of puppets, which is totally cool. I don't know anything, though, about the story or about anything else. But I am hoping for this thing to be good, because almost everybody who asked me to cover this one also asked me to cover Labyrinth, and they said that both movies are awesome. So I am hoping for this thing to be great, but there is that slight chance that this thing could also be a huge letdown. I have no idea, and the only way I'm going to find out if this thing is any good at all is if I shut up and I push play, and I'm going to do that right now. So, without further ado, it's time to kick back, relax, and check out The Dark Crystal. You know, guys, this is kind of weird. Jim Henson's works are normally known for having some of the best fucking, like, puppet, work you will ever see. Except the puppet work on these things, these fucking Skeksis, are pretty poor. You know, guys, there is one thing which makes, this scene just really fucking creepy, and it is the fact that Agra, who, mind you, is a puppet, has noticeably hard nipples, and the camera almost seems to be focused on them when the camera is panned wide on her. It's really fucking creepy, guys. You know, guys, I really am hoping for this story to get, to actually get a little bit better, because right now it's beginning to drag slightly, and also, so far I was kind of hoping that this thing would be just a little bit better. I'm still hoping, though, for the second half to be at least a little bit better than what I've seen so far. Okay, I have a rather stupid, question. So if the fucking Skeksis Emperor is able to grow younger by drinking the essence from podlings, which also, by the way, pulling out that essence, probably the darkest and creepiest scene in this entire movie so far. If it honestly even worked just a little bit, then why the hell did they let the previous Emperor die? Why didn't they just collect even more podlings, collect even more essence, and keep the fucking current, Emperor young, forever? Why the hell was he just magically dying and then he crumbles into dust when it seems to be as easy as collecting fucking podlings and draining them of all of their essence? I just sort of guess it leaves me a little bit baffled, guys. So, Kira has wings. We just saw her use them for the second time. And she doesn't think to just flutter up there and put the fucking shard in, and thus end all of this? No, of course not. She's gonna throw it to... No. God, guys, this is getting just a little bit stupid now. Well, guys, that was The Dark Crystal. Let me shut that off. Okay. Wow. I really should just start off by saying that I genuinely thought that this movie was going to be, I really thought it was going to be a lot, better, but I guess I should try to explain. I want to start with the writing. The writing here is a little bit weak, and when I say that, I mean I have to first punctuate it by saying that I honestly am not the biggest fan of fantasy stories, fantasy films, and fantasy novels. So when I happen to run into a fantasy film, odds are, if it really isn't doing anything, if it isn't doing something special or unique or different, then I basically mark it off as just, another bland, been there, done that fantasy film. And that's kind of sort of what this thing does. It doesn't really tell a story that is new or unique or different. It really is, guys, about as standard fantasy as you will ever see. With the only real change being that rather honestly than having elves and orcs and dwarves and all that, you have gelflings, podlings, mystics, and skeksis. I want to touch on the skeksis for just a sec, because a problem that I have always had with movies is when they cannot give you a straight and consistent pronunciation on a species name, a character name, what have you. And this movie has that in spades. Because at the very start of the film, we are told that the, race of vulture-ish, evil masters of the Dark Crystal are known as the Skeksis. And then at one point it randomly turns into Skeksis, and then towards the end of the film it once more is being pronounced as Skeksis. It's very, very weird, and it would have probably been fine if it was that certain characters or certain species pronounced it as Skeksis and the others pronounced it as Skeksis. But that honestly is completely crippled by the fact that not only are our lead characters occasionally calling them Skeksis and then other times calling them and then other times calling them Skeksis, we then have Agra, who is the first character we hear to actually call them Skeksis as opposed to Skeksis. And then at the end of the film, when we run into her a second time, she is then pronouncing it as Skeksis. It's very weird, and it does not keep a straight tone as to how to say the fucking, species name. And it just kind of sort of throws everything off slightly. Now, that honestly is just a minor issue, and most people are not even going to care. In fact, guys, I'm going to tell you right now, almost every single problem I have is going to be a minor problem that is going to be seen by damn near nobody else, but I do feel like mentioning these because this honestly is my thoughts going into this. Writing, as I said, felt to me a little bit weak, and it's because it's a fantasy film that's not trying to do anything different outside of changing out the standard fantasy races with a whole new set of races. That really is the one and only change between this and almost any other been there, done that, fourth-rate fantasy story. And it sadly is not enough to really, make this thing ultimately special. The acting here is certainly decent. The acting here is certainly good. And that is partially because this is still a Jim Henson film. And Henson was always known for two things. The first one was getting fantastic acting out of whoever he was working with. The second one, which sadly this movie kind of falters on, is puppet work. So yeah, guys, first of all, acting, I seriously can just say that I can seriously just say that the acting is fine. Nobody here really sucked. It's just the acting also wasn't ultimately, earth fucking shatteringly good. But now we get to the puppet work, and this is really where all of the major problems hit with me, is the puppet work. Because guys, when I think of Jim Henson's works, when I think of any of the films he made before this, any of the films he made after this, or any of the films he worked on before this or after this, the one thing that always stands out is that Jim Henson was in short a puppeteering god, and he could do anything. Why then do most of these puppets look so cheap? That actually is the first issue, because it really does look, guys, as if the film's entire puppet budget was totally blown on, let's see here, Aughra, the Skeksis, and the Mystics, and then every other puppet kind of suffers because every other puppet looks ridiculously cheap. The only time we ever actually see like a quality look on any of these puppets is during what still stands as probably the darkest scene in the entire film, which is when we see one of the podlings turned into a slave. And it really is just the darkest scene in the entire film in terms of tone, and it is going to creep you out, and it's partially because the podling, who has no other features on its face, because that seriously sort of where they skimped on the budget, especially with the podlings and the gelflings, is they don't have any facial features outside of a couple of like stray fucking lumps for things such as nose and cheekbones, and you see his face just like sink in, and it looks just creepy. However, that honestly is the only time that a fucking podling in this movie actually looks of some level of quality, because every other podling puppet looks so cheap, and our two fucking gelfling puppets look ultra cheap, and it really just does not look like the kind of thing that Jim Henson would normally do. Now, not only do we have puppets which certain ones look really cheap, we also have a problem with mouth flaps. And guys, one other thing that really made Henson's puppets work was that he knew how to bring life to these puppets. Henson and everybody who worked with him knew how to bring full life to these puppets, and one way was to have perfect mouth flaps to go with whatever is said. And this movie absolutely skimps on that, and rather honestly than try to have the mouth flaps match, what is being said, the mouth basically is just blindly flapping, and it looks incredibly or correction, I should say that it is blindly flapping to fill the fucking time that line of dialogue fills. And it ultimately makes the whole thing look really cheap. And mind you, again, that honestly is a problem that almost nobody else is going to notice, but I personally did, and I kind of felt that I had to mention it. One other problem when it comes to the puppets is that they tried to blend puppeteering and suit work, which normally is done really well, except they only do it with our two leads, Jen and Kira, who are both gelflings, and when we get to the wide shots, it kind of sort of looks like it's a couple of children in suits, because they were probably child actors. And then when we get to the puppets, the real big issue is, besides the fact that movement with the puppets was nowhere near as fluid or as natural as the suits, but also the body of the puppet doesn't totally match the body on the suit, and this is especially noticeable when it comes to arms, because the actors in the suits have very normal sized arms, thin but still relatively normal in terms of thin arm thickness. If that sounds really fucked up and weird, I know, but some people probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And then we get to the puppet, and the puppet has arms about as thick as this pen. And when we see that, it really is just so jarring that it actually is going to pull you out. It also doesn't help that the shots with the puppets were not made to line up with and hook up with the suit shots, so everything looks just really off when you jump from one to the other, or vice versa. Again, all of this, guys, is because I notice these sorts of things, and almost nobody else is going to notice them. Nobody else is going to care. However, I do feel that I do have to harp on the puppet work here, if for no other reason than because this thing was made by Jim Henson, and god damn it, Jim Henson has and did do better. This thing is probably the worst looking Jim Henson film in terms of puppeteering, yet it still towers above almost any other puppet work out there, because guys, I'm going to tell you, because Henson's worse is still better than most others. So you know what, guys, I honestly can sit here and harp on it because it didn't live up to the standards I had set going in, but it still isn't terrible, and it still doesn't absolutely kill the movie, partially because I know most other people don't notice that, kind of shit. Now, beyond all of that, guys, we also then have our sets, which just look absolutely gorgeous. Our score is beautiful. Our lighting here is perfect. Special effects outside of the puppets are great. Guys, ultimately, the biggest issues with this thing for me is that the writing is kind of weak and the puppeteering is kind of weak. Yet still, guys, that does not make this a bad movie. It is still certainly watchable, and I am incredibly happy to have sat down and watched it. However, I really don't think I'm going to be watching it a second time, but I still really liked watching it, once. I mean, it is certainly worth, checking out, especially if you have children. Now, I do have to warn, this thing is really dark in terms of content, so I wouldn't show this to, say, like, a 6-year-old, but I would probably show it to, like, an 8-year-old. 8-year-old and up, you will... they honestly will probably get a kick out of this, and they are in no way going to notice a single one of the problems that I saw. So, and plus, the people who've watched this movie for the last, like, 30 years are also probably not, now they probably don't even care about any of the issues that I saw because it's part of their childhood. Ultimately, guys, I am totally able to recommend the Dark Crystal at least as a rental. But I'm not totally sure if I would recommend a purchase. So basically, guys, if this thing's on like Netflix or Hulu, or if you can buy it, or if you can rent it from, say, I don't know, like Amazon or Redbox, by all means rent it. Purchase it afterwards if you genuinely loved it. I just don't really see this thing as a run out and purchase film. Now, the Dark Crystal came off of the Amazon wish list. The person who sent it in was Kari, and I am going to link you guys to Kari's current channel. And Kari, I thank you, because I was really curious about this movie. I had no idea if this thing was going to be I didn't know if this thing was going to be any good at all. And it is thanks to you that I finally got to check it out. And granted, it really isn't as good as I thought it was going to be, but it is still a solid movie, and I'm very happy to have had the chance to watch it. And once more, guys, please swing out. Now, guys, I want you to swing out and check out Kari's, channel. There's tons and tons of awesome stuff over there. As for me, after watching this, I actually kind of want to watch a little bit more of Jim Henson's work, and I see my Blu-ray of Labyrinth on my shelf. I'm going to go watch that. Anyway, guys, with that, we come to the close of another reaction and review. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care, and I will see you all in the near future. Peace.